So now that we have defined supply, defined demand, defined kind of the purpose of having them, right, this equilibrium, now we're going to talk about what are the things that cause either one of these curves to shift. And specifically, we're going to talk about demand in this section, right? So I lied before. I said that we were never going to separate them, but we're going to leave them separated for right now, just because it's going to be easier, I think. We got a demand curve here, and then, all right. So the first factor that's going to influence our demand is going to be our income. And when we're talking about income, we actually have to further separate this into two different types of goods. So the first type of good is a good that we are all used to buying. That's why it's called a normal good. So this type of good is really most items that we buy. So consumer electronics, clothing, most types of food, rent, insurance, cell phones, streaming services, everything like that, right? So when we're talking about normal goods, the defining characteristic with them is we're saying as our income increases, that's going to make the quantity that we demand for that particular good increase. So if our income increases, our quantity demanded is going to increase. And so if we have something like, if our good is, like I said, consumer electronics, or just streaming services, Disney Plus and stuff like that, right? If we get more money, it's going to result in a shift to the right of the demand curve. And so the way we can think about this is we can kind of hold the price fixed and say, okay, if the price doesn't change and the price stays fixed and we have more money and it's a normal good, right? That means that we're going to now have more quantity demanded than we had before. So the quantity demand is going to increase as a result of the increase in the income. So again, we can kind of fix this price, and then we can take a look at where that price reflects off each one of these curves to kind of do a gut check and say, okay, as a result of this change, my quantity demanded goes from this to this. So does that make sense, everybody? Why our demand increases when we have more income and it's a good that we desire, like a desirable good. Okay. All right. So the other type of good is an inferior good. An inferior good is defined by the characteristic that as your income increases, the quantity demanded of an inferior good decreases. So we're talking about, ramen noodles. Talking about bus passes. We're talking about spam. Right? So these are things that, as people have less money, they consume more of. And as they get more money, they consume less of it, right? So again, we're going to have that same shift, which is the increase in the incomes. But since we're now dealing with an inferior good, so an increase in incomes plus an inferior good, So this is the change that's happening. It's going to result in a shift to the left of our demand curve. That was so crooked it couldn't even autocorrect for me. There we go. So D2, D1. Yeah, so there's all sorts of ways. We can do 1 and 2. We can do 0 and 1 like I did last time, right? So let's just stick with the 0 and 1 since I did that in the previous example. And again, we can go ahead and we can fix the price and say if this is the price, what's going to happen to my quantity demanded? My quantity demanded here is going to decrease. Why is it going to decrease? Because my income is increasing and it's an inferior good. So people are going to substitute for higher quality goods. So inferior goods are low quality goods. Questions on income as it relates to shifting demand?